Good morning, everyone. Very good to see you guys. Wednesday, the sun is out. It's supposed to get up to 50 degrees. This is beautiful. So I hope you all enjoy it because I think the next 2 days are supposed to be rain. So make sure you get out today and enjoy this. Okay, I had asked you guys to either bring in your laptops or your iPads or print off that document that we have from de Tocqueville. And I want to spend our day today talking about that. I'm just going to be reading off my screen here. But it's a long piece that we gave you guys. And one of the reasons is it's truly one of the most important documents we're going to read this semester. And it's not accidental that this today is the halfway day for the whole semester. Right? We're now, from this point forward, we're moving towards the end of class, towards the final. So we're right at the middle. And de Tocqueville is kind of a perfect hinge for us as we think about the semester and what's been going on. De Tocqueville is not much older than you guys when he comes over. He is born in 1805 in France and born into a very prominent French family, but one that had almost been entirely wiped out by the French Revolution. So when de Tocqueville comes to America, he comes with a lot of anger towards France, but France has been restored after the revolution, and there's a new king, one that de Tocqueville is fairly loyal to. But you have to keep in mind that de Tocqueville not only despises the French Revolution, but he loves the American Revolution. And so he's pretty much right out of college. Again, he's barely older than you guys are. And he comes over with his best friend, a guy named Charles Beaumont. And the two of them end up spending about 18 months traveling through America between 1831 and 1832. And in their travels, they had actually gotten permission from the French king to come over and to study our prisons, which I know in 2026 sounds absurd because we do not have good prisons in 2026. In fact, I think we have horrible prisons. But at the time that de Tocqueville was coming over in the early 1830s, our prison system was considered the model prison system in the world. And all kinds of people came over and studied it to try and take back to the old world. So that's what de Tocqueville and his best friend Beaumont get a grant from the king to come over and study our prison system. But that was never their main intent. They always wanted to study what democracy was in America. And it gets, if you guys had a chance to read through the document, you know it gets a little bit confusing because de Tocqueville uses interchangeably the words democracy and equality. They're not exactly the same thing, but they basically come out in the same way. And so if you were confused by that, that's totally understandable because he really does use them interchangeably. But when he comes to America, he does something that, again, we would not think unusual 200 years later, but at the time he's doing it, it's very unusual. What he does is he creates, for all intents and purposes, the first sociological study. That is, if we ever want to find the foundation of sociology, it really goes back to what de Tocqueville is doing. And so he travels, as I said, for 18 months all across the United States, and he meets individually with all kinds of people. So in New England, he might meet with a fisherman. In the South, he might meet with a member of the Choctaw tribe. He might meet with a slave. He might meet, and he did very famously, he met with Charles Carroll of Carrollton, who was the oldest signer of the Declaration of Independence, still alive at age 95. And de Tocqueville sat down with him and interviewed him about the American founding. So that sounds normal to us, right? It's what a good journalist, it's what a good scholar would do today. But De Tocqueville's the first to do something like that, to go around and just do interview after interview after interview and pull all of that information together. So he's, as I said, 18 months here. His diaries are almost as good as Democracy in America. But he then goes back, and he's only in his 20s, but he goes back to France after his travels here in the US, and he issues Democracy in America, and it's a huge book. We barely gave you anything out of it. It's a huge book. It's 2 volumes. Volume 1 comes out in 1835, and Volume 2 comes out in 1840. And it has an interesting history. Most Americans at the time didn't like it when it came out because de Tocqueville is not celebratory about democracy. He's extremely skeptical about it, and he's very critical. And he's very critical about America. But around, and this is just, I don't know if I would quiz you guys on this, but just as an interesting side note, it goes out of print by the end of the 19th century. But then in 1904, it's brought back in print for just a little bit, makes a bit of a splash, and then it comes out again right after World War II. And from that point, it's unstoppable. It's not just because you're at Hillsdale that you're studying de Tocqueville. It wouldn't matter what college you go to. Every college student in America since World War II has studied de Tocqueville. So de Tocqueville just catches fire after World War II. And in large part, it's because so many people are asking, how is it that America won World War II? And then pretty much promoted American-style democracy throughout the world. And so that's why de Tocqueville becomes so famous again. He's probably not as famous as he was, say, 10 years ago. His star is fading a little bit. But we can generally say that from about 1946 up until today, he's been one of the most studied figures in American history. I think that's an accurate way of putting it. But let's just start with de Tocqueville, and I'd like to just go right through. I want to start there on the reading you have, page 1 of the reading, and just go through his argument. So anybody want to read this, starting with among the new objects that attracted my attention? Lily, that'd be great. Thank you.
Among the new objects that attracted my attention during my stay in the United States, none struck me more vividly than the equality of condition. I discovered without difficulty the prodigious influence that this primary fact exercises on the march of society. It gives a certain direction to the public mind, a certain turn to the laws, to those governing, new maxims and particular habits to the governed. Soon I recognized that this same fact extends its influence far beyond political mores and laws, and that it has no less dominion over civil society than over government. It creates opinions, gives birth to sentiments, suggests customs, and modifies all that it does not produce. Therefore, as I studied American society, I saw more and more in equality of conditions the generating fact from which each particular fact seemed to derive, and I rediscovered it constantly before me as a central point where all of my observations came together. Then I turned my thought back toward our hemisphere, and it seemed to me that I perceived something analogous to the spectacle that the New World offered me. I saw a quality of conditions that, without having reached its extreme limits as in the United States, approached those limits more each day. And this same democracy that reigned in American societies appeared to me to advance rapidly towards power in Europe. From that moment, I conceived the idea of the book you are about to read. A great democratic revolution is taking place among us. Everyone sees it, but not everyone judges it in the same way. Some consider it as something new, and, taking it for an accident, they hope still to be able to stop it, while others judge it irresistible, because it seems to them the most continuous, oldest, and most permanent fact known in history. Everywhere you saw the various incidents in the lives of peoples turn to the profit of democracy. All men aided it by their efforts. Those who had in view contributing to its success, and those who did not think of serving it, those who fought for it, and even those who declared themselves its enemies. All were pushed, pell-mell along the same path, and all worked in common, some despite themselves, others without their knowledge, blind instruments in the hand of God. So, the gradual development of equality of conditions, democracy, is a providential fact. It has the principal characteristics of one. It is universal. It is lasting. It escapes every day from human power. All events, like all men, serve its development.
All right, that was great, Lily. Thank you. So let's break this down and think about what he's saying. It's pretty obvious from what Lily just read, right? It's very obvious that democracy is everywhere, right? That we're not going to escape that. It is everywhere. But I want to take it a little bit further than that. Why is this so shocking for de Tocqueville? That is, what is it about democracy, say as opposed to republicanism or aristocracy or monarchy? What is it about democracy that makes it so unusual in his day and age? Why is it somehow different than other political systems? Did you guys catch this? This is what I want us to think about. Why did that happen? Anybody jump in on this? Right? Even those who worked against it ended up working for it. Right? It's a providential fact, he says. Right? This is something we have no choice about. God has already determined. But why? What is it about democracy that makes it unusual? Yeah.
The equality of conditions.
Okay, talk about that for a little bit.
Well, in comparison to like the monarchy that Tocqueville would have been used to, that was popular in Europe, this equality of conditions, you don't have that same like hierarchy. You don't have one person overall that is supreme and who can, in a sense, decide the fate of everyone else.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, so a huge part of it is we've started over in America, and de Tocqueville will argue that from the very moment that we see Jamestown in 1607, or the very moment the Pilgrims land at Plymouth Rock in 1620, there's already, because they're starting over, there's already an equality of conditions. And so there is a very primitive democracy or equality. And remember, he uses those interchangeably, right? Very important that we recognize that. So there's equality and there's democracy. Okay, that was really good, but let's take it one step further. Let's think about the language he uses. He tells us in that second paragraph, which Lily just read, soon I recognize that this same fact extends its influence far beyond political mores and laws. So there's something in democracy that's more than politics. It has no less dominion over civil society than over government. So it's a political theory, but it affects us in the social realm just like it affects us in the political realm. It creates opinions, it gives birth to new sentiments, it suggests customs and modifies all that it does not produce. Okay, what's that mean, guys? It changes our sentiments, it produces convictions, everything flows from it. What would that make it? It's not political. What is democracy? What other force in history? Yeah, go ahead.
It's cultural.
Yeah, and even more than that, what's behind the culture? What's behind the cult of the culture? Religion, right? So this is what's so shocking to de Tocqueville. Democracy acts like a religion. So it's not just political, it acts like a religion. If it were just political, fine, whatever happens in DC stays in DC. But no, that's not what's happening. It's affecting us in Hillsdale as much as it's affecting Jonesville, as much as it's affecting Fort Wayne and Ann Arbor. It's everywhere. And so the only other thing in history that has done that has been Judaism and Christianity. And so now democracy takes on the role of religion And yet we're not losing our religion. We will in the 20th century, but not yet. When de Tocqueville's writing, Americans are still deeply, deeply Protestant, very serious about it. So there's no loss of religion, but they've basically transferred the fervor of religion to the fervor of politics. And that's what's so amazing for de Tocqueville. So let's say that Connor and I are on opposite sides. I'm in favor of democracy, he's against it. Doesn't matter. God has already decided democracy's coming. So no matter how much he fights against it, all he's doing is giving it more credence, and it becomes even greater than it was. So de Tocqueville's not happy about this. And it's hard to tell that in what we just read. But he's not happy about this. Why? Because we have no choice about it. And de Tocqueville's very religious. Yeah, that I hope is obvious as well. He's a deeply religious man in the way that he's looking at all of this. But he's not quite sure why God is foisting this democracy upon the world. However, and I want you guys to know this just as solidly as you can, because this is critical for de Tocqueville. We absolutely have no choice that democracy and equality are coming. God has ordained that. There's absolutely nothing we can do to resist it. But we have all the choice in the world when it comes to what kind of democracy we want. So, do we want a democracy in which all of us are equal to pursue our excellences? A very high democracy. Right, so Chris has his excellence, Connor has his excellence, I have my excellence, Leon has his. And there's an equality in that, even though our excellences are particular, there's an equality in the way that we each can bring them to the community. Or do we have this kind of equality? I'm really jealous at what Connor can do. And I'm really ticked off that God didn't give me Connor's gifts. And so what's my response? I drag him down. I encumber him with laws. I encumber him with social mores, and I just drag him down. I make sure that he doesn't have real greatness in this world because I don't. So those are the two kind of democracies we can choose. One is beautiful. One is one of the most beautiful ways of living we can ever imagine. The other is absolute hell. Right? Because we are just tearing each other down to make us all equal at the lowest common denominator. And if you guys remember back to your Western heritage, that's what Plato said democracy was. Democracy is never about excellence. It's always about tearing down the other person. It's always about making us less than what we really are. And just think about this, guys. Think about what do each of us have in common? We all have in common, every one of us in this room, that we're fallen human beings. But our excellences are totally different. Every one of us in this room has a different set of excellences. And so that's why Plato argues, well, if we're really going to find what we all have in common, it's the lowest part of ourselves. That's what we have in common, not our greatnesses. Our greatnesses are what distinguish us one from another. Okay, does that make sense for everyone? That I want you guys to know this, right? So it's a providential fact. There are two types of democracy, but democracy is serving as a religion, not just a political system, but a religion. It's taking on its own life. Okay, so you guys with me on this? Okay, anybody have questions before we move on? Okay, good. So jump in at any time. Let's jump forward quite a bit. I'm going to skip almost a third of what you guys read. And I hope you read it, but I don't want to talk about it today. I want to jump forward to the section that we have, and I think, if I remember right, it's on page 16. No, I'm sorry. It's on page 11. The chapter, Some Considerations on the Present State and Probable Future of the Three Races that Inhabit the Territory of the United States. So that's at the bottom, if you guys see at the bottom of page 11. Everybody find that? So that's where I want to jump to. So again, the other stuff that you read in between is good, but I think if you get the point that it's providential and so forth, what we just talked about, he's just restating that in a variety of different ways. But then we get to this question about race. And what, of course, are the three races? Whites, blacks, and Indians. And de Tocqueville is very interesting about this because he's going to sound like some people we've seen before, and he's also going to sound like some people we'll see soon, like Abraham Lincoln. De Tocqueville's argument is essentially this about blacks. Whites have so mistreated the slave population that there is, and this is going to sound very much like John Randolph of Roanoke, there's no easy solution to ending slavery. If whites just say to their slaves, we're sorry, you're free now, well, whites still have all the power. Even in their ending of slavery, they have as much power as when they were holding slaves. And so blacks will be incredibly offended by this, that they're just released by the goodness of whites. But if blacks do what men have done all through history to earn their freedom, if they rise up and they take up arms and they declare rebellion against whites, well, whites will never forgive blacks. So there's really a no-win situation. And I hope you guys I realize this is not politically correct, but you just have to think like a 19th century person. Any person who is enslaved because they don't have the gumption to give up their life for freedom. So the idea is not necessarily that black people are less because they have dark skin. It's that why are they still in servitude? If they truly believed in freedom, they would willingly give up their own lives to rebel against whites. That had nothing to do with race, because you see the same argument being made about the Irish, being made about any people. It was a metaphysical reality. And whites, of course, could say, you look at the English tradition, you've got King Alfred, you've got Magna Carta, you've got the Glorious Revolution, you've got the American Revolution of 1776. People of English descent can say, look, my ancestors earned their freedom. You can't do that with blacks, except for people like Nat Turner. Think about Nat Turner. Nat Turner is one of the great slave rebels. Nobody in their right mind would ever say that Nat Turner was not a man. Nobody. He took his chance, he rose up, but the catch-22 is he killed a bunch of white people, and so he has to die as well. Right? So that's the catch-22, and that's the real problem of race in America. It does have to do with biological racism, don't get me wrong. There are arguments that black people are inferior or white people are superior just by their skin color, but the main argument is that they've not risen up against their masters. And I hope you guys realize, just think forward a little bit, one of the most important moments in American history, I would call it one of the crucial moments, is when Abraham Lincoln takes black soldiers into the army in 1863, arms them, and they go into battle and they fight like the dickens. Man, they are some of the best troops we have ever seen in American history. And it's amazing. So 1863, we arm blacks. And the Atlantic Monthly, if you guys know that, it's still around, but the Atlantic Monthly was one of the major magazines. Its headline, right after blacks go into battle, blacks prove manhood. It's in some ways, and I don't get me wrong, I love Martin Luther King, but in some ways, blacks advanced their own case in the Civil War in more ways than blacks have ever done before or since. It really, really mattered that they would do this. So that's what de Tocqueville is saying. He's saying this is a problem, right? It's a problem because if blacks actually do what men do, they'll be hated. and they'll be oppressed and they'll be put down by whites. But if blacks are just freed by the free gift of whites, they'll always be resentful. And so de Tocqueville basically argues that there's no way around this. There will be a race war. There will absolutely be a race war. It may not be today, but there will be a war of the races in America. And it will be bloody and it will be brutal. But there's no escaping it. And of course, I mean, this is essentially, for all intents and purposes, what the Civil War is in almost every way, or at least what it becomes. It's not what it starts out to be, but it's what it becomes. Okay, well then we have the other race, and this isn't, you guys didn't read this. And by the way, I was the one in charge of making this document. So if you guys want to blame anyone, blame me for this. I'm the one who did this. But I left out de Tocqueville's argument on the Indians. And I'll just tell you what it is really quickly. I mean, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's tragic, but it's beautiful in its own way. De Tocqueville is totally pro-Indian. And he argues this. He says, and of course, he's coming during Andrew Jackson. You know, he's 1831, 1832. This is Indian removal that's going on. And de Tocqueville actually interviews Indians he interviews the Choctaw Indians as they're being forcibly removed. And what he says, and remember, he can be very critical about America. What he says, and this is his wording, no people have ever been so driven to extinction as the American Indians, but under the laws that seem most genteel and most mild. And so what have we done? We've made this argument, we're moving the Indians out of the way of whites. We're all good humanitarians. We're just trying to take care of them. And of course, what are we doing? We're killing them in mass numbers. And so de Tocqueville ends this chapter. It's quite stunning. And de Tocqueville's a really good writer. But he ends this chapter by saying, and I didn't put this in here, but it would have been good too, and probably if I revise this again, I might put it in. But he says, what do we see? Political theater is always theater, right? And so never have we seen a people more noble destroyed more ably by just, quote unquote, just laws, right? So he's distraught over this. Okay, do you guys have any questions on race? Blacks, whites, Indians, anything at all? I realize not all of that's politically correct in 2026, but stuff, we have to be historians here and try and think like they did in the 19th century. Okay, so let's jump forward a little bit again. This time, I think, no, not page, yes, page 16. I was right, page 16. Okay. Somebody want to read here? Anybody want to volunteer? Lily already did. How about Mary? Do you have your? No problem. How about anybody else who's got it? Right. I mean, you could make something up, but it's probably best if you have it. Yeah. 16. Yeah. Thank you. You guys that was a joke. You were supposed to laugh. Sorry. Thank you. All right.
If a people could ever succeed in destroying by itself or only in decreasing the equality that reigns within it, it would do so only by long and difficult errors. It would have to modify its social state, abolish its laws, replace its ideas, change its habits, alter its morals.
Mores. Yeah, that means a more is a cultural norm. Okay. It's not a word we use anymore, but you guys should know that word. So more, and you always say the E like an A, but it's more. Okay. Yeah.
But to lose political liberty, it is enough not to hold on to it, and liberty escapes. So men do not hold on to equality only because it is dear to them. They are also attached to it because they believe it must last forever. You do not find men so limited and so superficial that they do not discover that political liberty may, by its excesses, compromise tranquility, patrimony, and the life of individuals. But only attentive and clear-sighted men see the dangers with which equality threatens us, and ordinarily they avoid pointing these dangers out. They know that the miseries that they fear are remote, and they imagine that those miseries affect only the generations to come, about whom the present generation scarcely worries. The evils that liberty sometimes brings are immediate. They are visible to all, and more or less everyone feels them. The evils that extreme equality can produce appear only little by little. They gradually insinuate themselves into the social body. They are seen only now and then, and at the moment when they become most violent, habit has already made it so they are no longer felt. The good things that liberty brings show themselves only over time, and it is always easy to fail to recognize the cause that gives them birth. The advantages of equality make themselves felt immediately, and every day you see them flow from their source. Political liberty from time to time gives sublime pleasures to a certain number of citizens. Equality provides a multitude of small enjoyments to each man every day. The charms of equality are felt at every moment, and they are within reach of all. The most noble hearts are not insensitive to them, and they are the delight of the most common souls. So the passion to which equality gives birth has to be at the very same time forceful and general. Men cannot enjoy political liberty without purchasing it at the cost of some sacrifices, and they are never secured it except by a great deal of effort. But the pleasures provided by equality are there for the taking. Each one of the small incidents of private life seems to give birth to them and to enjoy them. You only have to be alive.
Okay, that was great. Thank you. So this is a hard argument, guys. It's a really hard argument. But I want you to know what de Tocqueville is saying. So think about this, and we just talked about this. All liberty is purchased, and this is true everywhere, always. Liberty is always purchased by violence. It's purchased at great cost. So we have no instances in history where a government simply gives its people liberty. It has to be fought for. It has to be earned. There has to be a struggle for it. And that means that, and this is just inevitable, and it's one of the both great and hard points about liberty. All liberty is hard won. There has to be sacrifice. And so that means that someone or some ones have to be willing to put their lives on the line for liberty to be secure. It's not something that's just handed to you by someone else. It doesn't work that way. But equality is. Equality is one of those things that governments love. They love to pass laws to make us all equal. And think about this. And you guys, this is beyond your lifetimes, much beyond your lifetimes. But think about this. In 1989, where we'll end this class at the end of the semester, 1989, right? This incredible moment where communism just falls everywhere across Eastern Europe. Just one country after another, it falls. And there are great struggles for that liberty to make that happen. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the result of that. So let's say you're an East German, and on November 8th of 1989, you're all equal with one another. In theory, you're all equal. So everybody's just at the same level. Then November 9th hits, and communism falls. And on November 10th, you're in a totally free situation. Well, there are going to be all kinds of people. The market just opened. Political liberty just opened. There are going to be all kinds of people who see opportunities. They're going to take them. They may start a business. They may do whatever, and suddenly they're making a lot of money. And a lot of those people who had been equal, they suddenly lower in what they're doing because they don't know how to transition to liberty. And so in an equality situation, we're all roughly within the same area. But you get liberty, and it means you have extreme wealth and you have extreme poverty. And now that may change. 2 weeks later, it may reverse. Maybe the guy who did well one week is not doing well the next week, and so forth. But do you see what's happened? Once you get rid of equality, you can now see extremes. And think about our own society. Think about someone like Elon Musk, right? Just compare Elon Musk for a moment to one of the homeless guys I walk by all the time every day on the Bobby's Trail. Right? There could be no greater difference than some guy camping out in his tent and Elon Musk. That's liberty. That's liberty. And so that's why de Tocqueville says we see great benefits from it, but we also see great hazards as well. Whereas if we were under socialism, Elon Musk would probably still be pretty well off. but he wouldn't be that much higher than homeless John. Right? They're going to be roughly at the same level. So that's the great difference. Now, here's where it gets really complicated for de Tocqueville. And again, I'm going to use a non-politically correct example. For most of us in this room, the greatest act of equality that the federal government has passed is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In that act, the government said there can no longer be black fountains and white fountains. There can no longer be black buses and white buses. Right? We end segregation at that point by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All good, right? Those are all very, very healthy things. But here's the problem. We look at racial relations in America, and our automatic assumption is the government made it right. But if you go back and you study the actual history of the 1950s and the 1960s, there were incredible movements towards equality, all being done very, very privately, but also very publicly. So you think about the greatest man of the 1950s, Martin Luther King. What does he do? Well, it's televised. He has his church, and at the end of the Sunday service, he and all of his black parishioners walk out and march in the streets demanding equality and liberty. And all of these blacks are all dressed in suits and ties and dresses. They're middle class. They look very, very professional. And what do the white Southerners do? The white Southerners release dogs on them. They hose them down with fire hoses. They beat them to the ground. So, take my mom. My mom's 89. My mom had never met a black person in her life. She lived in a white western Kansas town, but she watches TV. And what does she see on TV? All of these nice, beautiful black people getting the tar beaten out of them. And so what does my mom think? This is unfair. This is totally, totally unfair. And so here's the point I want to make. It's Martin Luther King and his sacrifice that led to equality. When Congress passes the Civil Rights Act, they are late to the game. They are only doing it because it's now politically acceptable to do it, because Martin Luther King had made it acceptable through his sacrifice. Does that make sense for everyone? And so I think it's a great danger that we look back and say, oh, the government did it. Like, no, the government didn't do it. Martin Luther King and average black people did it. They're the ones who put their lives on the line Sunday after Sunday, day after day. Congress was really, really late in coming to the game, and they should not get the credit for that at all. So that's what I want. And again, I know you guys, it's not a politically correct argument, but I just want you to keep that in mind. We have to be open to the real cause of events and not to the perceived cause of events. And that's what de Tocqueville is telling us. So governments will get away with that because they can pretend that they're the ones who caused it, when in fact they're coming in late to the whole game. Okay, any questions on that? Is that, yeah. Yeah. And I would say by sacrifice. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, if it was purchased by violence, those, like the marches and everything were non-violent.
Well, remember, Martin Luther King is nonviolent, but the Southern whites are incredibly violent. So Martin Luther King is still opening himself up to violence, right? And that's they're basically, what Martin Luther King is doing is he's presenting himself as a martyr. And all of his black followers are doing the same thing. And that's what makes someone like my mom, it wasn't just my mom, it's Americans, white Americans who'd never seen black people before. Remember, there's a lot of segregation. And so she sees on TV, it's like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable what's going on. So she has a change of heart and white Americans overall do, because they see that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and the same thing will happen in 1989. All the anti-communists, they are, and we'll get to this at the end of the semester, but it's amazing. All the anti-communists, they're all armed only with their Bibles, and they're holding candles. And the East Germans all have machine guns. And yet, these people just holding their Bibles knocked down. And they could have been massacred, absolutely massacred. And yet they put themselves in harm's way. That's what's so when I say it's violent, I don't necessarily mean those seeking liberty are violent, but the atmosphere is violent in some way, if that makes sense. Good, thank you for that. Okay, is that clear for everyone? Okay, so let's jump forward a little bit more. And I want to look at something that's very positive in de Tocqueville. And so turn here to page 18, and now we see something that de Tocqueville is astounded about for America. Look what he says there. This is right, that's Book 2, Part 2, Chapter 5 of the use that Americans make of association in civil life. Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite. Not only do they have commercial and industrial associations in which all take part, but they also have 1,000 other kinds: religious, moral, grave, futile, general, particular, immense, small. Americans use associations to give fetes, to found seminaries, to build inns, to raise churches, to distribute books, to send missionaries to the antipodes. And in this manner, they create hospitals, prisons, schools. Wherever at the head of a new undertaking you see the government in France or a great lord in England, count on it that you will perceive an association in the United States. And de Tocqueville is astounded by this. Everywhere in America, we create communities. It's what we do. And what an irony, we are the Americans, we are the great individualists in the world. We are the rugged individualists. And yet, what do we do as individuals? We always form communities. And it doesn't matter if it's the American Red Cross or the Boy Scouts or Pi Beta Phi or Hillsdale College. Doesn't matter, right? It just does not matter. We do that, or Catholic Society or Lutherans, whatever it is, right? We do this all the time. And nobody else in the world does anything like this. And think about what that means. It means that we could form a community just in this classroom. Lane 233, right? 10 o'clock to 10:50. It's our community. And if we were disgruntled about something at Hillsdale, if I went and I said to the administration, well, this is a problem, we need to take care of this, they're going to say, okay, Brad, that's great. Your faculty, we appreciate that, thank you. But if all of us got up right now, and I'm not recommending we do it, but if all of us got up and we marched over to Moss Hall and we went up to Dr. Arns as a group and we said, we want this, this, and this taken care of, he's going to take it a lot more seriously, right? Because we have presented ourselves as a group. And it's the same thing on campus, right? Imagine you need to confront the administration with something, let them know something. Well, you could do so as an individual, or you could do so in your sorority or your fraternity or whatever group you belong to. And you're going to have a lot more influence by having a communal voice. And that's what we Americans are so good at. And I would argue, and I think this is de Tocqueville's argument, there's no one in the world who does this like we do. We have figured out how to balance our individualism with our communitarianism. And we love both. As Americans, we are both communitarians and individualists at the same time. And that's who we are. And you think about this, I'm sure some of you belong, or your parents do, to a homeowners association. My guess is, if any of you are Catholic, you might belong to the Knights of Columbus. We just have all of these different things that we can belong to over and over again. And we do that very well. And I told you guys this on the first day of class. Imagine there is a problem in Thailand. Well, the very first people who show up are Doctors Without Borders and the American Red Cross. It's our voluntary associations. It's our communities that do that. And then the Marines are third. But none of us in this room, even though it's in Thailand, none of us expect the Japanese to show up and relieve everybody. We don't expect the Australians or the New Zealanders to show up and to help the victims of Thailand. It's always the Americans. Always. It's what we do. It's who we are. And I think that's gorgeous. But that is us. And that's what de Tocqueville is getting at here. But he tells us, if you jump down just a couple of paragraphs there, line 45 on that page, if men who live in democratic countries had neither the right nor the taste to unite for political ends, their independence would run great risks. But they could for a long time retain their wealth and their enlightenment. While if they did not acquire the custom of associating in ordinary life, civilization itself would be in danger. A people among whom individuals have lost the power to do great things separately without acquiring the ability to achieve them would altogether soon return to barbarism. It is easy to foresee that a time is coming when man will be less and less able to produce by himself alone the things most common and most necessary to his life. So the task of the social power will grow constantly, and its very efforts will make it greater every day. The more it puts itself in the place of the associations, the more individuals losing the idea of associating will need to come to their aid. Sentiments and ideas are renewed. Now, think about this, right? You can sit there on your own and read a great book and be inspired by it. But if you go to Catholic Society, to Convivium, and I'm just using them as an example, you can go to whatever religious group you want, but you go to Convivium and your sentiments and your heart is renewed. Right? It is renewed in community. So, yes, you're a liberal arts student. Go read your Plato in the library. But in the evening, go meet with your religious group. Go to your Bible study, whatever it may be, because that's where ideas are renewed. That's where our life comes from. The heart grows larger, and the human mind develops only by the reciprocal action of men on other men. So let's take this even further. Let's just take Hillsdale, for example. And I meant what I said. I know all the homeless people because I take my dog for a walk every day down the Bobby's Trail, and the homeless guys and they all know me, and I know them, and we talk, and they're very nice. They're good guys. I feel sorry for them. But, imagine we have resources in town that can help them. We have resources. So, and I'll even say, John is the one I know best. I'll tell him, John, are you okay this week? What's going on? Do you have a place to stay? And they're taking care of me here, or whatever it may be. And I don't know his backstory. I don't know if he's out of prison or if he's an alcoholic, or who knows why he's homeless. But he's homeless, and it's just a fact of life that he's there. Well, okay, we do that in a small town. But think about walking down Miracle Mile in Chicago, and all the homeless people harassing you for money, right? And what's your thought? You hate them, for one thing, because they're really making your life uncomfortable. But you also think, well, this is the government's job to take care of it. That's what de Tocqueville is warning us against. We should never encounter a homeless person and say, that's the government's job to take care of this person. We should say, as a Christian, it is my duty to take care of this person. It is my community's problem. It is my community that takes care of it. And so what de Tocqueville tells us, once we have welfare in place, we easily forget. We lose our guilt. We don't feel guilty about the homeless, and we don't think about helping them because we've transferred it. And notice, what are we doing? Charity is the highest virtue. We're not being charitable when we say, go let the government take care of you. That's not charitable at all. That's giving away our responsibility as Christian men and women to some anonymous organization. That's what de Tocqueville is getting at, and it is really genius. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Let's do this for Friday. We still got one little section to read into Tocqueville, his section on despotism, and it's very good, so please read it carefully. But I also want you guys, and it's very hard, and I'm sorry to give you two hard readings right in a row, but I want you guys to read the piece from John C. Calhoun in your reader. Right, so that'll be for Friday. Read the Disquisition by John C. Calhoun. Thanks, everyone.